Good morning, and thank you for joining today's coffee break. I'm joined today by my colleague Lisa Wyszynski. Uh, these coffee breaks are an opportunity for us to share out some of the results of research we've been conducting. And this month, we're going to be covering some results from our 2025 syndicated study on generational wealth transfer. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So the topic of generational wealth transfer has received a lot of attention in the news over the past few years, with a lot of hype and really big numbers about just how much money is going to transfer from one generation to the next in the next couple of decades. And we decided, given the importance of this topic, to do a study on it to really cut through a lot of that hype to better understand what's really happening and how are people preparing and how are advisors helping their clients manage through this process. So we conducted a study with two surveys to help organizations come up with some actionable and meaningful insights that they can implement at their organizations.
Yes, so first we conducted a survey of over 1,000 consumers aged 60 and older with at least $500,000 in household investable assets. So, in other words, we were looking for people who will likely be leaving something when they pass in the coming decades. And we're going to be showing those consumer results throughout in green.
Well, Lisa, what about the kids?
The kids?
Yeah, so the people they're going to be leaving their money to, wouldn't it be important to learn from them too?
So, that's a great question. We didn't think we could fit all three audiences into this study, so we prioritized the future requesters because they generally understand their situation better. Future inheritors are likely fuzzy on the details, and many questions would feel hypothetical to them. But the children are an important part of this equation, as we don't know what they will do with their inheritances or where they will get advice, including whether they would be open to working with their parents' advisors and topics like that.
Got it. So we also surveyed 500 financial professionals who've been in their roles for at least 5 years, have $50 million or more in assets under management, earn at least half their income from working with retail clients, at least 30% of which are at least age 60. Finally, to qualify, they had to be involved in wealth transfer planning for at least some of their clients. Advisor results will be shown in dark blue throughout. In today's coffee break, Lisa and I will share a sampling of results across three of the key themes in this study. The first relates to the role advisors play in wealth transfer planning. Lisa, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So as you just mentioned, to qualify for the survey, advisors had to be helping at least some of their clients with the wealth transfer. We did set the bar low at 1% of clients. It turns out, though, that our low bar was relatively meaningless, as only 3% of the advisors we surveyed came remotely close to that in offering wealth transfer planning to less than a quarter of their clients. Instead, as you can see, more than 4 in 5 advisors provide wealth transfer for half or more of their clients.
So is this trending at all?
So while we don't have trend data, according to our survey, nearly 3 in 5 expect to spend more time helping clients with wealth transfer planning 3 years from now, and almost none plan to spend yet less. So I would say definitely yes.
That's encouraging. Now, there are lots of legal aspects to wealth transfer planning, such as creating a will, trusts, etc. We wanted to find out to what extent advisors are getting involved in these parts of wealth transfer planning. It turns out that very few advisors take the lead on any of them and are much more likely to either collaborate with other professionals or simply refer their clients to them. Majorities of advisors are involved in either leading or orchestrating most of these. However, for things like healthcare directives and wills, they're at least as likely to simply refer clients to an attorney.
So, Eric, is this good or is it bad? Should advisors play a different role here?
This is just my opinion, but the advisor is often a more frequent, ongoing point of contact, and they know their client's financial situation and goals better than any other professional that their clients might work with. Attorneys are mostly engaged for topics like some of those listed here. I think that it would be in the advisor's interest to strive to serve as orchestrator here. In other words, I'd like to see those light blue bars get bigger. In fact, even some of the dark blue bars don't necessarily require an attorney's involvement. And there are tools that clients can self-service or that advisors can use to help clients create and execute certain estate planning documents.
But aren't there other professionals that may need to get involved, such as accountants, to make sure that tax considerations are optimized?
Definitely. On this slide, we asked advisors what their general role is when working with both attorneys and accountants. We found that in both cases, advisors are more likely to refer clients to these professionals than to take a leading role or even serve as orchestrator. This is most pronounced for attorneys, where advisors are more than twice as likely to refer than to lead or orchestrate.
It would seem to me that given the many legal and tax aspects of estate planning, that advisors would be developing partnerships with other professionals to coordinate efforts for their clients. It may be that many of their clients have their own attorneys and accountants, and they could be unsure how to navigate coordination in such cases.
That's certainly a possibility. Let's move on to our next theme. Here we'll share a few findings from the consumer perspective to better understand what their goals are and what concerns them as they think about wealth transfer planning. One way to understand people's wealth transfer goals is to ask them whether they prioritize supporting themselves in retirement or leaving a legacy. There's a definite leaning towards making sure their needs are met while they're alive. Nearly 3 in 5 prioritize themselves, whereas less than 1 in 10 prioritize leaving a legacy. I would imagine most of those in the two largest bars on this chart would say that they'll leave whatever is left over when they pass, but they may not have any particular amount in mind.
So, how does their prioritizing themselves over legacy translate to how they're managing their assets?
So here's where things get really interesting. Despite that self-prioritization, 7 in 10 consumers plan to preserve or even grow their assets during retirement. In doing so, they're actually prioritizing legacy. Only 3 in 10 plan to gradually spend down their assets to support their lifestyle. However, I believe there's a justification for this behavior. Again, this is just my theory, but if you're a retiree and you're concerned about outliving your assets, one way to try to prevent that is to try not to deplete them. And so by striving to maintain your balance, you're effectively putting off any chance of outliving your assets. This may be wishful thinking for many, but I can see the potential logic behind that. Now, whatever money or property is left over when people ultimately pass, Lisa, what do they want to happen with it?
Well, that's a good question. So, we asked respondents in an open-ended question what they hope will happen with their assets after they pass. Since they simply typed in their answers, we categorize them the best we can. Over half say they want assets to go to their children, as you can see on the graph. Charities is a distant second. You'll note that there are other categories, such as will be useful, will go to who I intend, that will be spent responsibly, etc. That's a result of asking the question this way. So some people simply wrote, I hope my money will be useful after I die, or something vague like that. Some of these more generic answers might also be an indication that they haven't fully set their wealth transfer plans.
So were you expecting a higher percentage of those saying they want their money to go to their children?
Well, yes, and they actually did. So if we split the chart on the left by whether the respondent has children, a very different picture emerges. First, the vast majority of those with children want their assets to pass to them. And those without children appear split between having their assets go to charity or to other family members. This is one of a few factors that makes a huge difference in how people think about wealth transfer.
What other factors are there?
Well, I'll mention one that we covered in our report, but we aren't diving into today. It has to do with how people who have remarried or partnered later in life, who have children from a prior marriage or relationship, think about their money and wealth transfer. It's another important consideration advisors need to be mindful of as they navigate this topic with their clients.
That's fascinating. So what are these people most concerned about?
When it comes to thinking about their future and what will happen with their assets after they, or if they have one, a spouse or partner have passed away, they expressed highest concern about becoming cognitively impaired, such as getting dementia, Alzheimer's, etc., or about care they need as they age.
Sounds like long-term care planning may need to be incorporated into wealth transfer planning discussions.
Probably so. They are also concerned about taxes and potential law changes.
I see further down this list some concerns related to children. For example, 27% are concerned about their children responsibly managing their inheritance, 17% concerned about the perceived fairness of what they will receive, and 16% who say the inheritance process will negatively impact relationships among their children. Were you surprised with any of this?
Well, we've probably all heard sayings like, well, where there's a will, there's a war, or money tears families apart, and there's no shortage of stories along this theme. So yes, we did expect to hear more of this from our surveys, but instead, the story that unfolded was much more Pollyanna-ish in my mind. It just doesn't seem to be something that people will think will happen in their family.
Well, let's hope they're right. Speaking of the kids, our final theme has to do with them, especially in how advisors are engaging with them. So there are two main points in time that an advisor risks losing a client relationship and their relationship to their client's money. The first is when the first member of a married or partnered client passes away. Has the advisor done an adequate job involving both members of that couple such that this becomes a seamless transition? And the second is after the second member of that couple or any client that's been single all along passes away. If there are children, and there usually are, what will happen at that point? Retaining assets at this point is rated as the most important reason for engaging with clients' adult children among advisors surveyed. There are many other reasons to engage with adult children. All but one of those listed here are very or extremely important to a majority of advisors. Lisa, what can you tell us about whether this engagement is actually happening?
Well, Eric, first, more than 7 in 10 of those surveyed have one or more advisors. Second, 3 in 4 of these consumers have one or more children. We asked those with both if they've introduced their advisor to their children, and 41% said they have. However, nearly all the rest would be willing to do so if the advisor asked. Just 7% wouldn't. Does this match with what advisors are saying, Eric?
Actually, it does. They see a similar percent of their clients have children as the consumers did. Also, while we don't have the percentage like the consumers shared, about two-thirds of advisors say they've had contact with adult children of half or more of their clients.
Is it safe to assume that the advisors are asking for these introductions?
Yes and no. I mean, while a slight majority of advisors say they usually initiate this engagement, nearly as many say their clients tend to do so as well.
Well, I mean, given the importance of engaging the children to improve their asset retention chances, you'd think they'd have a plan for that.
So do they?
Well, like you just said, yes and no. While about half say they have a plan, that means the other half doesn't. And even among those who do, few have a fully implemented one.
Well, perhaps this will be one of those things they'll be spending more time on in the next 3 years, as they indicated earlier.
Perhaps this does sound like something that industry players might be able to help them with.
Speaking of industry players, I believe we have some on today's call. Let's see if they have any reaction or questions to what you and I just shared. So if anybody has any questions, we're happy to take them at this point or comments.
I have one. Um, so you said that you took a look at the open-ended question by whether or not they had children. Um, was there a question in there about plans for children in the future? Since I could see that only 1% of people without children said they were thinking about it. But did you look at people or have the opportunity to have data to look at how people answered if they currently didn't have children but were planning on it?
We're planning on having children.
Yeah.
So this audience were people age 60 and older. So we didn't ask about future children.
Okay. Would be interesting to know in future studies for people who just haven't really thought about any of that yet.
I agree.
Right. I think if we had gone younger or even talked with some of those that are planning to inherit, how they think about their own wealth transfer planning as well as, potential future inheritances.
So there's a lot of whining on the internet these days by the millennials primarily, and I think Gen Z also, fussing that their parents are not thinking about leaving anything behind, like it's an entitlement kind of thing, which is weird because as a boomer, I don't remember ever sort of expecting that from my parents. Is any of that vibe coming through any of this? Because I don't know that the parents are thinking any differently about leaving things behind, as your survey results showed, but there seemed to be a heightened expectation on the part of their inheritors. What do you think?
Yeah. So we unfortunately don't have the inheritors perspective in this, but we were also really struck, and Lisa shared a bit of the sentiment that because we really were trying to dig into some of those family dynamic challenges that can come up in wealth transfer planning, and we weren't seeing it in the data. The way that they described their relationships with their kids, which was very, very positive, was very, very, very strong and supportive. They're not anticipating there's going to be any issues, and I'm sure many of them just don't realize what's going to happen when there's money to fight over and people not thinking that they're getting a fair share or something. Um, but I agree with what you've seen on the internet. Um, and there was, I mean, I think there are a lot of people out there that are expecting big inheritances, and I think many of them are going to be sadly disappointed. Because the parents want, I mean, we've seen this in other studies that people are primarily, they want to make sure their money is going to support themselves. And if something's left over, great, but that's not the priority. The other thing we didn't find, and some people, there's been a lot of this in the news as well, is particularly in some of these big numbers. There's almost this assumption that a lot of money is going to be transferring between generations before the older generation has even died. Like they're going to be gifting lots and lots of their money to their kids while they're alive, and we didn't see that in the study either.
Wishful thinking, perhaps. Great information. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for coming, Evan. Any other questions or comments?
I have a comment and a question. Recently interviewed an advisor who has an affluent client base, and said that for clients who don't have long-term care insurance, there's often a dynamic when they need nursing care that their children have an adversarial relationship with them. They're spending money on nursing home care that would otherwise have gone to them. And it sets up an interesting dynamic where they think their elderly parents are taking their money away from them, which in some senses they are.
I actually had a personal experience, or I observed one over the past 5 years or so. There's some relatives in my family where an older parent was the surviving parent, needed round the clock care, and so that person's two children alternated every 2 weeks living with that person and taking care of them, which is a huge sacrifice. They were able to continue working in some way remotely, but I'm sure part of their motivation was preserving the estate. So what happens, right? People start thinking about that's their money, and so it's a difficult thing to manage, because that money is really that older person's money. If they need money for care, they should be able to spend that and not have other people trying to prevent that or something, because they want to maximize their own inheritance.
Question, do you think there's need for more training of financial advisors on how to establish better relationships with the younger generation?
Yes, definitely. I mean, as you saw in that, and there's really two main reasons for engaging with them. One is it can be helpful to know who they are and for them to understand at least something about the parent's financial situation so that when that ultimate event happens, they know what to expect. And the advisor knows who to reach out to for certain things. But secondly, the advisors also want to see if there's ways to turn those children into clients either today or when the older clients ultimately pass. Good question. Any others out there? Well, hearing none, I want to thank everyone for attending. Thank you, Lisa, for taking part in this with me. So all of these coffee break discussions ultimately make their way to our website and onto our YouTube channel. And we'll probably also be sharing out some snippets of these on YouTube, LinkedIn, and places like that as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day and enjoy the holidays.